Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session as we begin a probably quite a long journey looking at Every Man in His Humour by Ben Jonson. It's a play from 1598 initially, but the play undergoes a series of textual transformations over time, so there are quite a lot of variations in the text. So just be aware that you may, if you're following along with the text at home, that this may not be the version that you're looking at. This is the earlier version, sometimes known as the Italian version, that is out there. So there's going to be quite a lot of dancing around these humours, and the idea of humours, plays with humour in the title, or as a major theme within the work, is something that definitely turns up quite a lot in the late 1590s and will be an ongoing thing. So keep your ears out for what's going on in this play and other plays of its ilk. To get to grips with the first quarter or so of the text today, reading who shall I start with? Reading Bobabilla is...
Hi, I'm arrogant. I'm here.
Reading Lorenzo Jr. and Giuliano is...
I'm Lois. I'm here too. Here is London.
Reading Cobb today is...
Hi, Alan Scott, based in Suffolk.
Reading Musco and Biancha today is...
Hello, I'm Emma Kemp. I'm an actor and I'm in London.
Reading Lorenzo Senior and Piso is...
Hello, I'm here. Here is the Northwestern United States, and Scooter is here too.
We haven't assigned a part for Scooter, but I'm sure the one will emerge. Reading Stephano today is...
Rachael, actor on the East Coast.
Reading Matheo is...
Briony, actor in the East Midlands.
Reading Thorello is...
I'm Elizabeth Amisu and I'm also here. Here is Romford.
Reading Servant and Tib today is...
Hello, I'm not going to get metaphysical about this. I'm in Hull.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I'll be reading stage directions and generally moving things along, unless I've cocked up, in which case I will suddenly step in and start reading parts. Without further ado, we're going to dive into Act 1, Scene 1. And on stage we have Lorenzo Pazzi Senior and Musco.
Now, trust me, here's a goodly day towards Musco. Call up my son Lorenzo, bid him rise, tell him I have some business to employ him in.
Will, sir, presently.
But hear you, sirrah, if he be at study, disturb him not.
Very good, sir.
Exit Musco.
How happy would I estimate myself, could I by any means retire my son from one vain course of study he affects. He is a scholar, if a man may trust... He is a scholar, if man may trust the liberal voice of double-tongued report of dear account in all our academies. Yet this position must not breed in me a fast opinion that he cannot err. Myself was once a student, and indeed fed upon the self-same humor he is now, dreaming on naught but idle poetry. But since experience hath awakened my spirits, and reason taught them how to comprehend the sovereign use of study.
Enter Stephano.
What, cousin Stephano, what news with you that you are here so early?
Nothing, but in come to see how you do, uncle.
That's kindly done. You are welcome, cousin.
Aye, I know that, sir. I would not have come else. How doth my cousin uncle?
Oh, well, go in and see. I doubt he's scarce stirring yet.
Uncle, afore I go in, can you tell me, he have ere a book of the sciences of hawking and hunting? I would fain borrow it.
Why, I hope you will not a hawking now, will you?
No, worse, but I'll practice again next year. I have bought me a hawk and bells and all. I lack nothing but a book to keep it by.
Oh, most ridiculous.
Nay, look you now, you are angry, uncle. Why, any a man have not skill in hawking and hunting nowadays, I'll not give a rush for him. He is for no gentleman's company, and by God's will I scorn it. Aye, so I do, to be a consort for every humdrum, hang them scrollies. There's nothing in them in the world. What do you talk on it? A gentleman must show himself like a gentleman. Uncle, I pray you be not angry. I know what I have to do, I trow. I am no novice.
Go to, you are a prodigal and self-willed fool. Nay, never look at me. It's I that speak. Take it as you will, I'll not flatter you. What? Have you not means enough to waste that which your friends have left you, but must go cast away your money on a buzzard? I know not how to keep it, and know not how to keep it when you have done. It's brave. This will make you a gentleman. Well, cousin, well, I see you are even past hope of all reclaim. Aye, so now you are told on it, you look another way.
What would you have me do, trow?
What would I have you do? Marry, learn to be wise and practice how to thrive. That would I have you do, and not to spend your crowns on every one that humors you. I would not have you to intrude yourself in every gentleman's society till your affections or your own desert do worthily invite you to the place. For he that's so respectless of his courses oft sells his reputation vile and cheap. Let not your carriage and behavior taste of affectation, lest while you pretend to make a blaze of gentry to the world, a little puff of scorn extinguish it, and you be left like an unsavory snuff, whose property is only to offend. Cousin, lay by such superficial forms and entertain a perfect real substance. Stand not so much on your gentility, but moderate your expenses now at first, as you may keep the same proportion still. Bear a low sail. Soft, who comes here?
And enter a servant.
Gentlemen, God save you.
Welcome, good friend. We do not stand much upon our gentility, yet I can assure you mine uncle is a man of £1,000 land a year. He hath but one son in the world, I him as next heir. As simple as I stand here, if my cousin die. I have a fair living of mine own, too, beside.
In good time, sir.
In good time, sir. Do you not flout? You do not flout me, do you?
Not I, sir.
And you should. Here be them can perceive it, and that quickly, too. Go to, and they can give it again soundly, and need be.
Why, sir, let this satisfy you. Good faith, I had no such intent.
By God, and I thought you had, sir. I would talk with you.
Well, so you may, sir, and at your pleasure.
And so I would, sir, and you were out of mine uncle's ground, I can tell you.
Why, how now, cousin, will this ne'er be left?
Poor son, base fellow, by God's lid, and 'twere not for shame I would.
What would you do, peremptory ass? And you'll not be quiet, get you hence. You see, the gentleman contains himself in modest limits, giving no reply to your unreasoned, rude comparatives. Yet you'll demean yourself without respect either of duty or humanity. Go, get you in. For God, I am ashamed thou hast a kinsman interest in me.
And we'll just pause there at the exit of Stephano, because I'm really enjoying this. It's very lively stuff, isn't it? You know, students, you know, they're off. They are, you know, he's studying. He's a student, yes. And you know, and Stephano is similarly not quite doing what the older generation wants them to be doing, and it's quite rude in many ways. There's so much going on here. It's a really nice buzzy opening, or I'm liking it. Thoughts on the room? How are we sort of feeling as this as a sort of opening exchange? Because it's not like we're necessarily getting absolute plot. We're just sort of getting characters thrown at us and a sense of people. Thoughts on the room? Who wants to leap in first? Helen.
Well, Stephano's trying to be a prototype gentleman, all about hawking and hunting and the rest of it, and being very, very surly and irascible. Not surly, he's quarrelsome, which he thinks is a sign of gentility. If somebody comes along the street, he'll shoulder them aside. Rude to servants.
Yes, his poor servant who's just trying to, says, excuse me, and no. Eric.
He's doing that thing of, do you know who I am, to the servant, and then Lorenzo Senior just kind of goes, well, you're not anybody yet. Take it down a notch.
Briony.
Yeah, so it sounds like he's been trying to buy his friends a bit as well and flash the cash to give the impression that he's something a bit more than he is.
Yeah, it's all a bit superficial, isn't it? Cousin lay by such superficial forms. Yeah, it's a familiar tale. Helen.
He's bought a flash car before he's got his driving license.
Basically.
And
Eric?
he's not very bright, because the last thing you do when you're in front of your uncle is to point out that you're his heir if his son dies.
Yeah.
Really, that is not politic.
No.
That's very tacky, isn't it? It's just like, yeah, that might be true, but there's really no reason to believe that Lorenzo Jr., who seems to be a robust young man, is going to predecease.
And even if he was on the point of death, it's not the right thing to say so.
Yeah, yes. and he's doing this. Literally, the servant's come in and said, excuse me, and he says, hi, I'm the heir apparent. Going, what? Eric, then Lois.
I was just going to say that, Lorenzo Senior has the surname, Di Pazzi, which in Italian means of the mad people or something like that. At least I don't know if that's sort of what it means at this time or if they even knew what it meant. I'm guessing Jonson did because he collaborated a lot with. I was going to say Inigo de Montoya, but that's not the name. I keep getting that name wrong. Anyway, yeah.
Inigo Jones, but
yeah.
Lois.
Yeah, the other thing that's quite characteristic of Jonson is Stephano's assumption that if you get a book, that will tell you everything you need to know about keeping a hawk. And there's an awful lot in Jonson about, codifying things, turning things into rules and games and so on. And this is kind of an example of it, that if you're really dumb, then you don't just ask people or get somebody who knows about hawks. You just buy this hawk and then you get a book. And so, okay, first catch your hawk, second, it gets really goofy.
Yeah, you just want to see the mess of what's happened in his rooms or whatever, where this hawk has run rampant and just destroyed everything.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting in the corner going, shush, why I don't work? Just work.
You don't think he's got the hawk with him?
No. There's part of me thinking there's no reason why we can't add a comedy business to comedy. I see hawkish opportunities here. Anyway, we should move on because we are mid-scene. Stephano has exited, leaving Lorenzo Senior with the servant, who the servant probably now gets a chance to actually say something constructive.
I pray you, sir, is this the Pazzi house?
Yes, Mary, it is.
I should inquire for a gentleman here, one Signor Lorenzo di Pazzi. Do you know any such, sir, I pray you?
Yes, sir, or else I should forget myself.
Oh, I cry you mercy, sir. I was requested by a gentleman of Florence, having some occasion to ride this way, to deliver you this letter.
To me, sir? What do you mean? I pray you remember your courtesy to his dear, most selected friend, Signor Lorenzo de Pazzi. What might the gentleman's name be, sir, that sent it? Nay, pray you be covered.
Signor Prospero.
Signor Prospero? A young gentleman of the family of Strozzi, is he not?
Aye, sir, the same. Signor Thorello, a rich Florentine merchant, married his sister.
Enter Musco.
You say very true. Musco.
Sir.
Make this gentleman drink here. I pray you go in, sir, and it please you.
And they leave Lorenzo Sr. on stage.
Now, without doubt, this letter's to my son. Well, all is one. I'll be so bold as to read it, be it but for the style's sake, and the phrase, but which I do presume, both which I do presume are excellent, and greatly varied from the vulgar form, if Prospero's invitation gave them life. How now, what stuff is here? Sir Lorenzo, I muse we cannot see thee at Florence. Blood, I doubt, Apollo hath got thee by his ingle, that thou comest not abroad to visit thine old friends. Well, take heed of him, he may do somewhat for this household servants or so. But for his retainers, I am sure I have known some of them that have followed him 3, 4, 5 years together, scorning the world with their bare heels, and at length been glad for a shift, though no clean shift, to lie a whole winter in a half-sheet cursing Charles Wayne and the rest of the stars intolerably. But, quis contra Deus, well, sir, sweet villain, come and see me, but spend 1 minute in my company and 'tis enough. I think I have a world of good jests for thee. Oh, sir, I cannot show thee 2 of the most perfect, rare, and absolute true gulls that ever thou sawest, if thou wilt come. Blood, invent some famous, memorable lie or other to flap thy father in the mouth withal. Thou hast been father of 1,000 in thy days. Thou couldst be no poet else. Any scurvy roguish excuse will serve. Say thou comest but to fetch wool for thine inkhorn, and then too thy father will say thy wits are a wool gathering. But 'tis no matter, the worse, the better. No, but 'tis no matter, the worse, the better. Anything is good enough for the old man. Sir, how if thy father should see this now? What would he think of me? Well, however I write to thee, I reverence him in my soul, for the general good of all Florence delivers him, Lorenzo, delivers him. Lorenzo, I conjure thee, by what? Let me see, by the depth of our love, by all the strange sights we have seen in our days, I or nights either, to come to me to Florence this day. Go to, you shall come, and let your muse go spin for once. If thou wilt not, heart, what's your God's name? Apollo. If this melancholy rogue, Lorenzo here, do not come, grant that he do turn fool presently, and never hereafter be able to make a good jest or a blank verse, but live in more penury of wit and invention than either the hall beadle or the poet Nuntius. Well, it is the strangest letter that ever I read. Is this the man my son so oft hath praised to be the happiest and most precious wit that ever was familiar with art? Now, by Our Lady's blessed Son, I swear I rather think him most unfortunate and in the possession of such holy gifts, being the master of so loose a spirit. Why, what unhallowed ruffian would have writ so profane a pen unto his friend? The modest paper even looks pale for grief to feel her virgin cheek defiled and stained with such a black and criminal inscription. Well, I had thought my son could not have strayed so far from judgment as to mart himself thus cheaply and the open trade of scorn to jeering folly and fantastic humor. But now I see opinion is a fool and hath abused my senses. Musco.
And at a quick as a flash, enter Musco.
Sir.
What is the fellow gone that brought this letter?
Yes, sir, a pretty while since.
And where's Lorenzo?
In his chamber, sir.
He spake not with the fellow, did he?
No, sir, he saw him not.
Then Musco, take this letter and deliver it unto Lorenzo, but, sirrah, on your life, take you no knowledge that I have opened it.
Oh, Lord, sir, that were a jest indeed.
Exit Musco.
I am resolved I will not cross his journey, no, nor will I practice any violent means to stay the hot and lusty course of youth. For youth restrained, straight grows impatient, and in condition like an eager dog, who ne'er so little for his game withheld, turns head and leaps up at his master's throat. Therefore I'll study by some milder drift, to call my son unto a happier shrift.
And they exit. Yes, Musco has been told, no, do not tell my son that I've read the letter, just deliver it to him. So we'll find out in a moment which side Musco's bread is buttered on. Predictions, if you wish. So yes, now we're sort of engaging in active plot. Is starting to kick in now, done via a letter. There are more of these people who are perhaps a bit of student wastrels about, and there's lots of little bits of irony being played during this letter, which I enjoyed. You know, sir, how if thy father should see this now? So yes, lots of opportunity for whoever's playing Lorenzo Senior to really chew the scenery, I imagine here. Thoughts from the room about where this is going, Lynn?
Just that, you know, I'm not as good at this as I wish I were, but Jonson's syntax is challenging me a little. He's so parenthetical that it's kind of hard for me to parse the syntax on the fly like this. But I think that with practice, that his verse and his prose could be really fun and really interesting. But I think you have to know how to deliver it.
Yeah, it's one of those things the whole cast has to sort of really absorb and make it feel natural, and feel where to play it and stress it, because there's a lot of work the actor is being asked to do here, and it is going to be something also for the audience. Actually, it's quite nice that we don't start with a speech like this, that we actually have some relatively straightforward opening gambits to give the audience a chance to click in to the language, because that's sometimes the problem when the wall of words comes flying at you, that this actually comes in a couple of minutes in. That's quite helpful. Lois?
Yeah, I mean, that letter of Wellbred, I mean, of Prospero, it's extremely witty. I mean, it's a typical, Wellbred's the name he has in the English version. I suppose it's a very witty young man knocking himself out to be clever in a letter. It's full of puns and things. I mean, it is really quite tricky trying to figure out how to bring them all out. I mean, just this bit, at length been glad for a shift, though no clean shift, to lie a whole winter in half a sheet, cursing Charles's wane. I mean, the for a shift just means as a kind of last resort, but clean shift refers more, I think, to a clean shirt, probably. Something clean to shift into, to change clothes into. And then the half a sheet almost certainly is both a sheet of paper and a sheet in the usual sense. I'm not sure about cursing Charles's wane and the rest of the stars. I mean, I think partly just since what he's talking about here is followers of Apollo. I mean, Apollo may do something for his servants, but not for his retainers, and they mostly end up cursing their stars because they're not making any money out of writing. I mean, it's incredibly complicated. I don't know if you could ever get the whole of it across to anybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's one of the questions that about what to do with a lot of Jonson plays is, they are too long. There's too much material for us to sensibly necessarily put into an evening of theatre, because they're we're not just creeping towards 3 hours, we're vaulting over it. So there is a question of how much you try to get across, that you just say, well, the sentence is flowing nicely, let's not worry about that too much. And then there's a question of what do you cut? Do you want to get to the essence of it? And there's a whole series of artistic decisions that a production's going to make. And this letter is perhaps the first sort of element where you're going, well, maybe this is where adjustment would necessarily have to come in. How much of that letter do we need? But then if you give it to a skilled performer actually and give them time to do it, then actually there's a lot that could be dug out of it. It's sort of this awful balancing act between good material, too little time, and where does the balance lie? Other thoughts from the room? Eric?
I was going to say it's refreshing to actually launch into action for once, rather than having the whole and now we have the prologue, and then we have other people coming in for no apparent reason that will be revealed in Act 5 of this production. And it's very much this is what I'm going to, you can see Lorenzo Sr.'s motivation from the beginning and what he's going to try and do versus what is actually going to happen.
We are starting with character and situation, and plot is being layered in nicely, and I do get a sense, even with the servant who doesn't have a name, you do get a sense of that they're a person. They're not just a messenger delivering a speech, which is quite nice. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll go into the next scene. So, Act 1, Scene 2, Lorenzo Jr. Enters with Musco, and of course last time we saw Musco just a few seconds earlier, he just said he was definitely not going to tell Lorenzo Jr. That his father's read the letter.
Yes, sir. On my word, he opened it and read the contents.
It scarce contents me that he did so. But Musco, didst thou observe his countenance in the reading of it, whether he were angry or pleased?
Why, sir? I saw him not read it.
No? How knowest thou then that he opened it?
Marry, sir, because he charged me on my life to tell nobody that he opened it, which, unless he had done, he would never fear to have it revealed.
That's true. Well, Musco, hie thee in again, lest thy protracted absence do lend light to dark suspicion. Musco, be assured I'll not forget this, thy respective love.
Enter Stephano.
Oh, Musco. Didst thou not see a fellow here in a call him doublet? He brought mine uncle a letter even now.
Yes, sir. What of him?
Where is he, canst thou tell?
Why, he's gone.
Gone? Which way? When went he? How long since?
It's almost half an hour ago since he rode hence.
Whoreson, scanderbag, rogue. Oh, that I had a horse, by gods. Lid, I'd fetch him back again and heave and hoe.
Why, you may have my master's bay gelding, and you will.
But I have no boots. That's the spite on it.
Then it's no boot to follow him. Let him go and hang, sir.
By my troth, Musco, I pray thee help to trust me a little. Nothing angers me, but I have waited such a while for him all unlaced and untrussed yonder, and now to see he is gone the other way.
Nay, I pray you, stand still, sir.
I will. Oh, how it vexes me.
Tut, never vex yourself with the thought of such a base fellow as he.
Nay, to see he stood upon points with me too.
Like enough so. That was because he saw you had so few at your hose.
What? Hast thou done? God a mercy, good Musco.
Ay, mal, sir, you wear such ill-favoured coarse stockings, having so good a leg as you have.
Foh, the stockings be good enough for this time of the year, but I'll have a pair of silk ere it be long. I think my leg would show well in a silk hose.
Aye, afore God, would it? Rarely well.
In sadness, I think it would. I have a reasonably good leg.
You have an excellent good leg, sir. I pray you pardon me. I have a little haste in, sir.
1,000 thanks, good Musco.
And exit Musco at last.
What I hope he laughs not at me, and he do.
Here's a style indeed for a man's senses to leap o'er, ere they come at it. Why, it is able to break the shins of any old man's patience in the world. My father read this with patience? Then will I be made a eunuch and learn to sing ballads. I do not deny but my father may have as much patience as any other man, for he used to take physic, and oft taking physic makes a man a very patient creature. But, Signor Prospero, had your swaggering epistle here arrived in my father's hands at such an hour of his patience, I mean when he had taken physic, it is to be doubted whether I should have read Sweet Villain here. But what, my wise cousin? Nay, then, I'll furnish our feast with one gull more toward a mess. He writes to me of 2, and here's 1, that's 3, if faith. Oh, for a 4th. Now fortune or never fortune.
Oh, now I see who he laughed at. He laughed at somebody in that letter. By this good light, and he had laughed at me, I would have told mine uncle.
Cousin Stephano, good morrow, good cousin. How fare you?
The good for your asking, I will assure you. I have been all about to seek you. Since I came, I saw mine uncle. And i' faith, how have you done this great while? Good Lord, by my troth, I am glad you are well, cousin.
And I am as glad of your coming, I protest to you. For I'm sent for by a private gentleman, my most special dear friend, to come to him to Florence this morning. And you shall go with me, cousin, if it please you. Not else. I will enjoin you no further than stands with your own consent and the condition of a friend.
Why, cousin, you shall command me, and 'twere twice so far as Florence, to do you good. What, do you think I will not go with you? I protest.
Nay, nay, you shall not protest.
By God, but I will, sir, by your leave. I'll protest more to my friend than I'll speak of at this time.
Oh, you speak very well, sir.
Nay, not so neither. But I speak to serve my turn.
Your turn? Why, cousin, a gentleman of so fair sort as you are, of so true carriage, so special good parts, of so dear and choice estimation, one whose lowest condition bears the stamp of a great spirit, nay, more, a man of so graced, gilded, or rather, to use a more fit metaphor, tinfoiled by nature. Not that you have a leaden constitution, cousin, although perhaps a little inclining to that temper, and so the more apt to melt with pity when you fall into the fire of rage, but for your luster only, which reflects as bright to the world as an old alewife's pewter, again, a good time. And will you now, with nice modesty, hide such real ornaments as these, and shadow their glory as a milliner's wife doth her wrought stomacher with a smoky lawn or a black cypress? Come, come, for shame, do not wrong the quality of your dessert in so poor a kind, but let the idea of what you are be portrayed in your aspect, that men may read in your looks. Here within this place is to be seen the most admirable, rare, and accomplished work of nature. Cousin, what think you of this?
Mary, I do think of it, and I will be more melancholy and gentlemanlike than I have been, I do assure you.
Why, this is well. Now, if I can but hold up this humor in him as it has begun, Cazzo for Florence, match him and she can. Come, cousin.
I follow you.
Oh, follow me? You must go before.
Must I? Nay, then I pray you show me, good cousin.
And they exit. End scene. Oh, lots and lots of things going on here. scenes where different people are doing things at the same time, intimations of sort of physical business going on. Stephano has ants in his pants. He's dancing. He's pacing back and forth. Lorenzo Jr. is spending quite a lot of time doing some letter business upstage, presumably. And we're getting different aspects of what we think that these characters are like as well. Because Lorenzo Jr. we've heard who his mates are, and we've heard from his father. But this isn't quite the character I was expecting to meet, actually, because he seems much more self-aware and much on top of these other people than I initially thought. So that's really interesting. I'm really interested to know what's going on with Musco as well. What game is Musco playing? Or not playing? The whole back and forth about the letter at the very beginning of the scene. I just love that, but I'm not quite sure what Musco is doing. Lynn.
Well, Musco maybe just sort of looking at the long game. Lorenzo Sr. is not going to be around forever. Lorenzo Jr. will be his master at some point. So that's the person he wants to cultivate. But what Lorenzo Jr.'s motivation for buttering up his cousin Stephano is, I have yet to make out. But he's obviously flattering Stephano and telling him exactly what he wants to hear, like, you're such a gentleman, act like a gentleman. Like, so people say, what a great work of nature when they see you. Oh, you're so awesome. Like, what does he want from Stephano? One has to wonder.
Well, there's an element of sort of shits and giggles as a motivation. It does seem like he's just collecting people to make fun of. Lois.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. The crucial sentence in Prospero's letter is the one about, I've got a couple of fools here that I want you to meet. I mean, this idea that you spend your life going around laughing at other people is essentially, I think, what Prospero and Lorenzo Jr. are about. And Lorenzo is going to bring one more fool, Stephano, maybe if another one, because a mess is actually 4 people at a table. I mean, that's the original meaning of, the officers' mess, I think, and messmates, people that were part of a table in the officers' club. So they've got 2 fools. Now there's going to be a third, and they're going to try to find a fourth, which they will do without much trouble, I suspect. And so he's trying to make Stephano come out, be as stupid as possible, to be as funny as possible for his and Prospero's benefit. I mean, it's kind of a funny way to spend your life, but if you've got an independent income, you can go around and laugh at people all the time.
Yeah, it's what students do, That's the student life. Helen, were you waving earlier?
Yeah, it's the character of Stephano is interesting me because he's got an awful lot of bluster, but he says, is he laughing at me? If I thought he was laughing at me, and then the guy looks up and he says, I'd tell my uncle. And they say, if I had a horse, I could go catch him and fight him. And Musco says, well, there is a horse. Haven't got any boots.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got an aim in life, which is to be a very quarrelsome young gentleman. But he's not really got the... he's not got the courage to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
And it isn't natural to him to be quarrelsome.
Yeah, it's but it's a really nice setup because you can just keep playing that game. And once the audience know that's the game, you can keep playing it again and again and again in different variations. With hopefully once they're complicit in that game, it just leads to greater hilarity. Lois, then Eric.
Yeah, just another thing is, I mean, he's being quarrelsome and because he thinks that's a gentleman, but Lorenzo has just put into his head is the idea of being melancholy, and boy, is that going to be important in the play. I mean, this is all about humor, and this is really what humor is. I mean, in fact, melancholy is a humor. It's one of the 4 humors, and Stephano is now going to do that one for all it's worth.
I do like there's one the exchange between Musco and Stephano. There's just I just love the "hast thou done." It is enough, silly servant person, with your wordplay. Because there is a lot of sort of, I've got at least one line where it's I've just written "boom boom" in the margin of just it's no boot to follow it. These really dodgy puns and wordplay that's going on of just going great gag. Eric, then Lois again.
I'm enjoying the language and the insults as well, just sort of like where you kind of like. Stephano has a sort of vocabulary of insults as well as sort of thinking himself to be the gentleman of the the cock of the walk, pun intended. But I'm just enjoying things like oh yes, you are most graced, most gifted by nature. You are actually tinfoiled by nature, if I might say, and you can kind of imagine that this is where the idea of the tinfoil hat comes from.
Yeah, Lois.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something else, because especially when you said "hast thou done," because I think there's implied action here. I mean, Stephano is partly untrust. He's undone some of his points, the things that attach doublet to hose, and he's asking Musco to help him get dressed again. And that explains things like, I think Musco's commenting on his stockings too, and the bit about points, standing on points, and when Musco says he saw you had so few, I don't know if that means that I don't know, maybe Stephano hasn't done a terribly good job of dressing himself, and a lot of these points are not yet fastened or something. In which case he has saggy stockings.
Which is, the worst kind. Nobody wants to know about his stockings. Elizabeth, then Helen.
Yeah, I know there was a very humorous section about the silk stocking, and how he said, and the leg, and how I was just thinking about the early modern concept of the leg and how fine the leg would look in the silk stocking. I thought that was quite humorous. I wanted to speak to what Lois said about the humour in the title, and the title being "Every Man in His Humour," because right from the beginning we get a sense of each character being their own. It reminded me a little bit of the importance of being earnest. I think Jonson's playing with us here with the use of the word humour. I'm not sure about the changing of the meaning of the word, the widening of the meaning of the word, to be humour. A humour is being in one's own way, being in your own humour, to be in your own style or your own way of doing things, but also to be funny. And I think that we're starting to see sort of different meanings of the word humour come out already in the text.
And we'll be exploring this more as we go forward. Helen.
Oh yes, just a thing on the points. If he was actually going to fight, he would loosen his points to give him, or to take exercise. You loosened your points to give yourself a bit more stretchy ability. And then you had to tighten them up again afterwards when you're just walking about.
It's giving us so many options, and it's giving us that intimation that this is a really busy scene. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack, and that level of detail where I'm just annotating quite a lot about what potentially is going on here, which again also adds to the amount of time you have to spend rehearsing it. Some plays that are, here's a speech, say the speech, stand over there, move on. This play is not doing that, and demands more. Also a question of precisely where asides are living as well. In the version we have here, we don't have that much marked, but we're starting to find some of those aspects as well. What's to the audience, what's not. How you play a scene where you're effectively doing a lengthy aside to the audience, but people are watching you do that, but and how this action breaks up. Any other thoughts before we move into the next scene? No, lovely. Act 1, Scene 3, where you'll have noticed we've actually had a relatively narrow palette of characters. Let us open this out to some new people. Act 1, Scene 3, enter Signor Matheo, to him Cobb.
I think this be the house. What ho?
Who's there? Oh, Signor Matheo. God give him good morrow, sir.
What, Cobb? How doest thou, good Cobb? Dost thou inhabit here, Cobb?
Aye, sir. I and my lineage have kept a poor house in our days.
Thy lineage, Monsieur Cobb. What lineage? What lineage?
Why, sir, an ancient lineage and a princely. My ancestry came from a king's loins. No worse man. And yet no man neither but Herring, the king of fish, one of the monarchs of the world, I assure you. I do fetch my pedigree and name from the first red herring that was eaten in Adam and Eve's kitchen. His Cobb was my mighty great grandfather.
Why mighty? Why mighty?
Oh, it's a mighty while ago, sir. It was a mighty great Cobb.
How knowest thou that?
How know I? Why, his ghost comes to me every night.
Oh, unsavoury jest. The ghost of a herring Cobb?
Aye, why not the ghost of a herring Cobb, as well as the ghost of Rachael Bacano? They were both broiled on the coals. You are a scholar. Unsolve me that now.
Oh, rude ignorance. Cobb, canst thou shew me of a gentleman, one Signor Bobabilla, where his lodging is?
Oh, my guest, you mean, sir?
Thy guest, alas! Ha ha!
Why do you laugh, sir? Do you not mean Signor Bobadilla?
Cobb, I pray thee advise thyself well. Do not wrong the gentleman, and thyself too. I dare be sworn he scorns thy house. He lodge in such a base obscure place as thy house? Tut, I know his disposition so well. He would not lie in thy bed if thou'dst give it him.
I will not give it him. Ass, I thought somewhat was in it. I could not get into bed all night. Well, sir, though he lie not on my bed, he lieth on my bench, and please you to go up, sir. You shall find him with 2 cushions under his head, and his cloak wrapped about him, as though he'd neither won nor lost. And yet I warrant he ne'er cast a better in his life than he hath done tonight.
Why, was he drunk?
Drunk, sir? You hear not me say so. Perhaps he swallowed a tavern token or some such device, sir. I've nothing to do with all. I deal with water and not with wine. Give me my tankard there, ho. God be with you, sir. 6 o'clock. I should have carried 2 tons for this. But what, ho? My stubble, come.
Lie in a water-bearer's house? A gentleman of his note? Well, I'll tell him my mind.
And exit Matheo.
What, Tim? Show this gentleman up to Signor Bobadilla. Oh, and my house were the brazen head now. Faith, it would e'en cry more fools yet. You should have had some now. Would take him to be a gentleman at least. Alas, God help the simple. His father's an honest man, good fishmonger, and so forth. And now does he creep and wriggle into acquaintance with all the brave gallants about the town, such as my guest is. Oh, my guest is a fine man, and they flout him invincibly. He useth every day to a merchant's house, where I serve water, one of Master Thorello's. Here's the jest. He's in love with my master's sister, and calls her mistress. And there he sits a whole afternoon sometimes, reading of these same abominable, vile, pox on them, I cannot abide them, rascally verses, poetry, and speaking of interludes, 'twill make a man burst to hear him. And the wenches, they do so jeer and tie at him. Well, should they do as much to me? I'd forswear 'em all. By the life of Pharaoh, there's an oath. How many water bearers shall you hear swear such an oath? Oh, I've a guess. He teacheth me. He doth swear the best of any man christened. By Phoebus, by the life of Pharaoh, by the body of me, as I am a gentleman and a soldier, such dainty oaths. And withal he doth take this same filthy roguish tobacco, the finest and cleanliness. It would do a man good to see him, the fume come out forth of his nostrils. Well, he owes me 40 shillings. My wife lent him out of her purse by 6pence a time, besides his lodging. I would have had it. I shall have it, he saith, next action. Helter skelter, hang sorrow, care will kill a cat. Up tails all and a pox on the hangman.
And exit. And we'll pause there because there's some good stuff in there. I mean, there's some very good bad jokes in there. And I will, the mighty gag. I mean, it's such a cheap gag, but it's actually really nicely placed, and it's not set up in a really tedious way. And there's lots of really nice lines in there. We got someone at eventually sort of expounding plot and set up stuff. The whole stuff about the red herring. Yeah.
I mean, it took me a while to try and get a flavour for the character, and once you got into this long speech here, it becomes clear that he's pretty well played as the comedy servant.
Yeah, it's there's some really, really nice stuff in there. I mean, again, there's a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of really good stuff. Any other thoughts? As I sort of paused mid flow, but I just thought it was worth noting some nice material in there. Helen.
Yeah, when Tony Robinson did his 10 worst Tudor jobs or something like that, television program, water carrier was in there among them. It was a heavy business, and you got very little in return.
Emma.
I was just going to say that I really enjoyed the image of a little ghostly fish. And then the little ghost of the rasher of bacon. There's just some really hilarious imagery in his jokes, which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Lois.
Yeah, and I mean, the rasher of bacon is, of course, Roger Bacon, and the bit about being broiled on the coals. I mean, it's so it's actually I didn't know that Roger Bacon was burned, but burned at the stake, was he?
No,
not.
So. He kind of disappears. He certainly got into deep doo-doo, but I don't think he was. I don't think he was burnt as a heretic.
Yeah,
and we get a brazen head mentioned later on, so it does feel like there's peppering of random elements in that may be referencing there.
I got the impression that it possibly was just bacon. I don't know. I mean, you never do know, do you?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm thinking this because I'm pretty sure I've seen a footnote to it somewhere, but probably in the other text, the English version. But that Rasher Bacon is Roger Bacon. I mean, that's why Matheo says that he's ignorant, because he ought to know better that it's actually Roger or Rogero or something. I mean, again, it's full of puns and allusions and all sorts of stuff. That's the trouble. Just about every line needs about 2 footnotes.
Well, I don't know if it needs to. I mean, the thing about all of the stuff, if it is referencing Bacon in that way, and other texts that we, some of which we've looked at and other ones we haven't, I don't think it's interfering with the flow of the scene, actually, because it also contains a fairly straightforward joke about bacon. So it doesn't fundamentally matter. And if and maybe the reference isn't there, and maybe we're overreading it and overthinking it. But we can, because we have the time. Briony.
Apologies if this has already been said, because I had to disappear for a bit earlier. But we've got another lame-o sponging student here who's supposed to be a rich young gentleman, and he's crashing on the sofa of one of the poorest people he could find and borrowing money off them. So yeah, he's definitely another one similar to Lorenzo Jr. was it earlier? No.
Well, it's interesting the status of Lorenzo Jr. I mean, you as opposed to the other potential spongers or recreants that we've got here. You do get the impression that this chap is just turned up and just turns up at a bar and just slowly piles up pennies on the side just to say, "I'll be with you in a minute," and waits for someone to take pity on them. I can see that happening. Other thoughts? Eric.
I like how sort of Cobb was playing this, well, like we said at the beginning, sort of the game of like, oh yes, I have great lineage. And, you know, sort of Matheo goes, what lineage? And then obviously sort of feeding him lines of like, well, you know, I'm descended from Cobb Herring, and he visits me every night, and so on and so forth. And then I love how he managed to like work in that he's kind of like descended from Great Cobb, who was there at the beginning of the world. It's just
Lynn.
Yeah, it's it sounds like this guy sleeping on the bench is kind of the gentleman rogue that Stephano aspires to be, but he's not smart enough to be. You know, got an income of his own, spent it all, sponging off of this poor water bearer, swears the most delicate oaths. Yeah, he's playing that gentleman game more successfully than Stephano, but he's kind of what Stephano aspires to be.
Okay, into this matrix, we've had a discussion of Bobadilla. Let us now meet Bobadilla, who now discovers himself on a bench, and to him, Tib.
Hostess.
What say you, sir?
A cup of your small beers, sweet hostess.
Sir, there's a gentleman below would speak with you.
A gentleman? God, so I'm not within.
My husband told him you were, sir.
What a plague. What meant he?
Signor Bobadilla.
And that's said by Matheo within.
Who's there? Take the basin, good mistress. Come up, sir.
He would desire you to come up, sir. You come to a cleanly house here.
God save you, sir. God save you.
Said by Matheo as he enters.
Signor Matheo, is it you, sir? Please, you sit down.
I thank you, good signor. You may see I am somewhat audacious.
Not so, signor. I was requested to supper yesternight by a sort of gowns where you were wished for, and drunk too, I assure you.
Vouchsafe me by whom, good signor?
Marry, by Signor Prospero and others. Why, hostess, a good stool here for this gentleman.
No haste, sir. It is very well.
Body me, it was so late we parted last night. I can scarce open mine eyes yet. I was but new risen as you came. How passes the day abroad, sir? You can tell.
Faith, some half hour to 7. Now trust me, you have an exceeding fine lodging here, very neat and private.
Aye, sir, sit down, I pray you, Signor Matheo. In any way, possess no gentleman of your acquaintance with notice of my lodging.
Who? I, sir? No.
Not that I need to care who know it, but in regard I would not be so popular in general as some be.
True, signor, I conceive you.
For do you see, sir, by the heart of myself, except it be to some peculiar and choice spirits to whom I am extraordinarily engaged, as yourself, or so, I could not extend thus far.
Oh, Lord, sir, I resolve so.
What new book have you there? What, go by Hieronymo?
Aye, did you ever see it acted? It's not well penned.
Well penned. I would fain see all the poets of our time pen such another play as that was. They'll prate and swagger and keep a stir of art and devices when, by God, so they are the most shallow, pitiful fellows that live upon the face of the earth again.
Indeed. Here are a number of fine speeches in this book. Oh, eyes, no eyes, but fountains fraught with tears. There's a conceit. Fountains fraught with tears? Oh, life, no life, but lively form of death. It's not excellent. Oh, world, no world, but mass of public wrongs. Oh, God's me, confused and filled with murder and misdeeds. Is not simply the best that ever you heard? How do you like it?
This good.
To thee, the purest object to my sense, the most refined essence heaven covers, send I these lines, wherein I do commence the happy state of true deserving lovers. If they prove rough, unpolished, harsh, and rude, haste made that waste, thus mildly I conclude.
Hey, proceed. Where's this? Where is this?
This, sir, a toy of mine own in my nonage. But when will you come and see my study? Good faith, I can shew you some things, very good things, I have done of late, that boot becomes your leg, passing well, sir, methinks.
So, it's fashions of news.
Mass, sir, and now you speak of the fashion. Signor Prospero's elder brother and I are fallen out exceedingly. This other day I happened to enter into some discourse of a hanger, which I assure you, both for fashion and workmanship, was most beautiful and gentlemanlike, yet he condemned it for the most pied and ridiculous that ever he saw.
Signor Giuliano, was it not? The elder brother?
Aye, sir, he.
Hang him, rook. He has no more judgment than a malt horse. Why, Sir George, I hold him the most peremptory, absurd clown, one of them, in Christendom. I protest to you, as I am a gentleman and a soldier, I ne'er talked with the like of him. He has not so much a good word in his belly. Oh, iron, a good commodity for a smith to make hobnails on.
Aye, and he thinks to carry it away with his manhood still where he comes. He brags he will give me the bastinado, as I hear.
How, the bastinado? How came he by that word, Trout?
Nay, indeed, he said cudgel me. I termed it so for the more grace.
That may be, for I was sure it was none of his words. But when? When said he so?
Faith, yesterday, they say. A young gallant, a friend of mine, told me so.
By the life of Pharaoh, and it's for my case now, I should send him a challenge presently, the bastinado. Come hither, you shall challenge him. I'll show you a trick or two. You shall kill him at pleasure, the first stoccado, if you will, by this air.
Indeed, you have absolute knowledge in the mystery, I have heard, sir.
Of whom, I pray?
Faith, I have heard it spoken of divers, that you have very rare skill, sir.
By heaven, no, not I. No skill in the earth. Some small science, know my time, distance, or so. I have professed it more for noblemen and gentlemen's use than mine own practice. I assure you. Hostess, lend us here another bedstaff here, quickly. Look you, sir, exalt not your point above this state at any hand, and let your poniard maintain your defence thus. Then give it the gentleman. So, sir, come on. Twine your body more about, that you may come to more sweet, comely, gentlemanlike guard. So indifferent. Hollow your body more, sir. Thus. Now, stand fast on your left leg. Note your distance. Keep your due proportion of time. Oh, you disorder your points most vilely.
How is the bearing of it now, sir?
Oh, out of measure ill. A well-experienced man would pass upon you at pleasure.
How mean you pass upon me?
Why thus, sir? Make a thrust at me. Come in upon my time. Control your point and make a full career at the body. The best practice, gentlemen, of the time term it the passado, a most desperate thrust. Believe it.
Well, come, sir.
Why, you do not manage your weapons with that facility and grace that you should do. I have no spirit to play with you. Your dearth of judgment makes you seem tedious.
But one venue, sir.
5 venue, most gross denominations ever I heard. Oh, the stoccado while you live, signor, not that. Come on, put on your cloak and we'll go to some private place where you are acquainted, some tavern or so, and we'll send for one of these fencers where he shall breathe you at my direction. Then I'll teach you that trick. You shall kill him with it at the first, if you please. Why, I'll learn you by the true judgment of the eye, hand and foot, and to control any man's point in the world. Should your adversary confront you with a pistol, 'twere nothing. You should, by the same rule, control the bullet, most certain by Phoebus, unless it were hail shot. What money have you about you, sir?
Faith, I have not passed 2 shillings or so.
'Tis somewhat with the least, but come, when we have done, we'll call up Signor Prospero. Perhaps we shall meet with Corridon, his brother there.
And they exit. Another set of character studies. I'm really, they vaguely mention plot things in passing, but actually this is 2 people getting different set pieces going on. Matheo there is sort of like that vinyl junkie is going, no, you've got to listen to this album. It's great. No, listen to the track. Have you heard this bit from this great play? You've got to listen to it. No, I'll read the whole speech. No, sit down. And the fact that we've done a bit of Geronimo means that all sort of leaps at us in quite an agreeable way. And then we get more action. We've got more business with this swordplay stuff, which again gives us a whole physical dimension that we're not able to do here. And I just love this whole thing. Yeah, you can out-fence a speeding bullet, unless it's a hail shot, in which case, if it's just one bullet, you're okay. Otherwise, don't try this against an Uzi. So yeah, lots of really, really great stuff going on here. Thoughts from the room about these people and their purpose in life. Lois.
Yeah, there's loads of implied business, obviously, and I'm pretty sure that what happens in that thing between Bobabilla and Matheo is that Bobabilla thinks he can show up Matheo. Matheo is swinging wildly, but in fact quite dangerously. And when Bobabilla says, I don't want to fence with you anymore, you're too terrible, what he really means is he's terrified of him. I mean, he's about to be run through. I think there's all sorts of stuff in this. I mean, Bobabilla has clearly been giving the impression of being a very posh person, but he's actually sleeping on a bench in somebody else's house. And that's why he's asking Matheo not to let anybody know where he lives. It's not just that he wants to be private, but it's obviously not quite the image he was trying to put across.
Yeah, that sense of the worlds that they're living in, as well. When Bobabilla sort of picks up on, when they're talking about the language that Matteo's using as well. When he says, the bastinado, was that the word he used? Oh no, he just said cudgel. But I changed. I re-upped it to improve the flow. So they're coming from different worlds, and it's this interesting clash of personalities actually that I think really makes the scene do interesting things. Other thoughts, Lynn?
I mean, I like Lois's take of what that mock swordplay is about. That Bobadilla is trying to teach him how to fence like a gentleman, and Matheo is just sort of like so wild. It's like, okay, I'm not. But I also think that Bobadilla is like, let's teach you how to fence, and is kind of distracting Matteo's attention so he can say, "You got any money? How much cash have you got on you?" Because Bobadilla never has, 2 pence to rub together because he lives wild, and he's, borrowed 40 shillings, which is actually kind of a good chunk of cash for a water carrier's household. Such a sponge.
Yeah, and there's that rather nice touch. Let's go somewhere where they know you. In other words, if you run out of money, they'll trust you. We'll live on your credit. There's clearly no question that Bobadilla is going to pay for anything.
No, he's very much taking this young lad under his wing. Eric.
I was just gonna say that it's that whole thing of like, yes, bounce like that, and then okay, so he puts him into a position where you can imagine him sort of going, yeah, no, like that, no, yeah, no, not like that, but like this, and then sort of bounce on your one leg and jump upside down or whatever it was, or do a backflip, or sort of like a list of unreasonable demands that you would never use in fencing, and he would probably get killed if you use them. But then, it just ends up with like a whack on the head or something. And it's like, no, I won't play with you anymore. It's not fair.
Helen.
Yes, some of our humorous people are just fools. They're gulls. But the difference between Stephano and Bobadilla is that Bobadilla knows, he's knowing. He's aware of the difference between what he aspires to be and the reality, whereas others think they're pulling it off.
Yeah.
So that he is a very different character to the what was the name of the guy he was talking to? What? Matheo.
Yeah.
Or Stephano, the nephew of Lorenzo Senior.
And I'm at the moment classing Lorenzo Jr. in the same sort of mold as well, as someone who is actually more knowing than the people who's around him. Actually, that he may be a young swaggering swain, but he's not actually ignorant of the game that's at play here. So that there are different levels, and they're all very nicely drawn. I say it's these character studies. Emma.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, I think lots of the human behaviour in this scene that we've just read is really kind of familiar to us, actually, and really relatable. For example, Bobadilla almost kind of, complaining about being tired, but also boasting about the fact that he was out really late last night. Like, that's something, you might have seen people do. And kind of Matheo, he wants to get... When you're trying to do that, you often, compliment what the other person's wearing or something, and that's what he does. He says, "Oh, I really like your stockings." I kind of recognise that behaviour as well.
Other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll go into the next scene of Act 1. Still in Act 1, people. I know. It's who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought it?
Jonson.
It's Jonson. Act 1, Scene 4, and yes, another selection of peoples. Enter Thorello, Giuliano, and Piso.
Piso, come hither. There lies a note within, upon my desk. Here, take my key. It's no matter neither. Where's the boy?
Within, sir, in the warehouse.
Let him tell over that Spanish gold and weigh it. And do you see the delivery of those wares to Signor Bentivogli? I'll be there myself at the receipt of the money anon.
Very good, sir.
And exit Piso.
Brother, did you see that same fellow there?
Aye, what of him?
He is e'en the honestest, faithful servant that is this day in Florence. I speak a proud word now, and one that I durst trust my life into his hands. I have so strong opinion of his love, if need were.
God send me never such need. But you said you had somewhat to tell me. What is it?
Faith, brother, I am loath to utter it, as fearing to abuse your patience, but that I know your judgment more direct, able to sway the nearest of affection.
Come, what needs this circumstance?
I will not say what honour I ascribe unto your friendship, nor in what dear state I hold your love. Let my continued zeal, the constant and religious regard that I have ever carried to your name, my carriage with your sister, all contest how much I stand affected to your house.
You're too tedious. Come to the matter, come to the matter.
Then, without further ceremony, thus. My brother Prospero, I know not how, of late is much declined from what he was, and greatly altered in his disposition. When he came first to lodge here in my house, ne'er trust me if I was not proud of him, methought he bare himself with such observance, so true election, and so fair a form, and, what was chief, it showed not borrowed in him. But all he did became him as his own, and seemed as perfect, proper, and innate, unto the mind as colour to the blood. But now, his course is so irregular, so loose affected, and deprived of grace, and he himself, withal, so far fallen off from his first place, that scarce no note remains to tell men's judgments where he lately stood. He's grown a stranger to all due respect, forgetful of his friends, and not content to stale himself in all societies. He makes my house as common as a mart, a theatre, a public receptacle for giddy humour and diseased riot. And there, as in a tavern or a stew's, he and his wild associates spend their hours in repetition of lascivious jests, swear, leap, and dance, and revel night by night, control my servants, and indeed what not.
Faith, I know not what I should say to him, so God save me, I mean at my wit's end. I've told him enough, one would think, if that would serve. Well, he knows what to trust to for me. Let him spend and domineer till his heart ache. And he get a penny more from me, I'll give him this ear.
Nay, good brother, have patience.
Blood, he mads me. I could eat my very flesh for anger. I marvel you will not tell him of it, how he disquiets your house.
Oh, there are divers reasons to dissuade me, but would yourself vouchsafe to travail in it? Though but with plain and easy circumstance, it would both come much better to his sense and savour less of grief and discontent. You are his elder brother, and that title confirms and warrants your authority, which, seconded by your aspect, will breed a kind of duty in him and regard. Whereas, if I should intimate the least, it would but add contempt to his neglect, heap worse on ill, rear a huge pile of hate, that in the building would come tottering down, and in her ruins bury all our love. Nay, more than this, brother, if I should speak, he would be ready in the heat of passion to fill the ears of his familiars with oft reporting to them what disgrace and gross disparagement I had proposed him. And then would they straight back him in opinion, make some loose comment upon every word, and out of their distracted fantasies contrive some slander that should dwell with me. And what would that be, think you? Marry, this. They would give out, because my wife is fair, myself but lately married, and my sister here sojourning in a virgin in my house, that I were jealous. Nay, as sure as death, thus they would say, and how that I had wronged my brother purposely, thereby to find an apt pretext to banish them my house.
Yes, perhaps so.
Brother, they would, believe it. So should I, like one of those penurious quacksalvers, but try experiments upon myself, open the gates unto mine own disgrace, lend bare-ribbed envy opportunity to stab my reputation and good name.
And we're just going to pause there before some other characters come in, because I think there's just a little bit to unpack there. Yeah, we're getting more detail about Prospero, who we've not met yet. We've heard a lot about from various different people, and this is very much gone to the dogs, gone to the, it's like he was such a nice young lad, and now it's just student parties never ending. It's just he's bringing people back to the house. There's an awful lot of people calling each other brother here, and I'm just questioning how literal the relationships are. Is this a three-way brother situation, literally, or not? I'll go to Lynn first.
I think Thorello and Giuliano are brothers, and Prospero is Thorello's brother-in-law, his wife's brother.
Lois, I think, may have a thought on that.
Yeah, I think Prospero is the brother of Bridget, or whatever her name is in this version. Anyway, Bridget is the sister of Thorello's wife, and Prospero and Giuliano are brothers. We all got that one?
So the wife isn't. I looked at the Rath persona. It's Hesperida or so, I don't know. So
Hesperida,
Mrs. Thorello and Mrs. Thorello's little brother and little sister are all living in Thorello's house. Is that right?
I think it's just Mrs. Thorello's sister is living there.
Well, then who is Prospero? What is Prospero's?
Prospero and Giuliano are brothers,
No, Prospero and Thorello are brothers. No, Giuliano and Thorello.
I think Thorello is his brother-in-law. I think. Yeah.
Oh, Giuliano is the wife's brother.
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Now this is exactly the right kind of. I mean, to a degree, I don't care actually what the precise relationship is, but the fact that the scene really does not make this clear is the really important thing.
Yep.
And maybe just once we've actually figured out who's related to who literally and who is just socially, and what this household looks like, slightly tweak the use of brother constantly, because there's other part of me thinking, are you just sort of using it as a term of affection that you're not actually, and because in a modern audience you could think that as well, and that's quite confusing. Anyway, we've flagged up that that's confusing. we'll circle back to precisely how all that works later. But otherwise, it's there's lots of really nice descriptions of what's going on here. There's a lot of stuff being said. Other thoughts from the room? Elizabeth.
Thorello landed with a bang, didn't he? I love the new characters. I just love the way the characters enter and they kind of like hit the ground running, almost as though we're supposed to know who they are as soon as they arrive.
And they're always doing something fiddly as well. It's like, there's a thing, there's a key and the desk and the thing, and go and do the thing.
Yeah. And then don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the little detail at the beginning. He's the honestest, faithfulest servant in Florence. And I'm sort of thinking, is that a setup for something? That feels like a setup for something about this servant. But it's sort of very quickly done before we get into sort of this quite detailed plot speeches. Other thoughts before we complete the scene? Eric, then Lois.
I'm just intrigued by the fact that I don't know if this is just like the formatting from OCR or whatever, but like sort of, I'm just intrigued that some of it seems to be written in blank verse and other parts just seem to be written in prose. And it's like it makes an interesting distinction that Bobabilla and pretty much everyone we've seen before, except like the letters and Lorenzo Senior, I think, and Giuliano are. Sorry, except Lorenzo Senior and Giuliano, everyone else is written in sort of prose.
Yeah, the balance between prose and verse is pretty much accurate. There are a couple of bits where it's got slightly banjaxed, but it's quite rare on the whole. The formatting's about right. So yeah, the Jonson is really dancing between the two to different effect. It seems to be doing interesting things. Lois, then Emma.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing in this scene and kind of the key to Thorello is the end of his long speech when he's saying, I want you to talk to your brother because if I did, people might think, and then he goes into this thing, because my wife is fair, myself but lately married, and my sister here sojourning a virgin in my house, that I were jealous. Good God, how could they possibly think that? Yeah, I just keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when you've got long speeches like this, it's always really important to put the important informational payload at the end. And the other stuff that you might dance around with, just to really hammer home, okay, there's a piece of information you need to know at home. Here it is, and pass the baton on. Emma.
I was just going to say that there's a... sorry, I hope my internet connection's okay. It keeps telling me it's not. There's a parallel kind of between Thorello and Lorenzo Senior in that they both have worries about, Lorenzo Senior about his son and Thorello about kind of what's happening in his wife's house. But they're both afraid to act on it, afraid to actually confront the person. Afraid to confront the person in case of the repercussions. So they both suggest that they're going to do something a bit more underhand. So we'll see what that might be.
Well, we paused mid-scene. They vented and done some exposition, at which point we have the return of enter Bobabilla and Matheo. Oh, have we lost Matheo?
Temporarily, I think, yes.
I think we may have lost. Oh no, back in the room. Excellent. Sorry, I sort of threw that at you. I didn't sort of cue you in properly. Anyway, so Thorello, Giuliano, they're having their conflab. Enter Bobadilla and Matheo.
I will speak to him.
Speak to him? Nay, away by the life of Pharaoh, you shall not speak to him, you shall not do him that grace. What time of day to you, gentlemen? Is Signor Prospero stirring?
Then, what should he do?
Signor Thorello, is he within, sir?
He came not to his lodging tonight, sir, I assure you.
Why, do you hear, you?
This gentleman hath satisfied me. I'll talk to no scavenger.
How? Scavenger? Stay, sir, stay.
And exeunt, someone.
Nay, brother Giuliano.
Blood, stand you away and you love me.
You shall not follow him. Now, I pray you, good faith you shall not.
Ha, scavenger. Well, go to. I say little, but by this good day, God forgive me, I should swear, if I put it up so, say I am the rankest that ever pissed. Why? Splood, and I swallow this, I'll ne'er draw my sword at the sight of man again while I live. I'll sit in the barn with Madge Owlet first. Scavenger, heart. And I go near to fill that huge tumbrel slop of yours with somewhat. As I have good luck, your gargantua breach cannot carry it away so.
Oh, do not fret yourself thus. Never think on it.
These are my brother's consorts. These are his comrades, his walking mates. He's a gallant, a cavaliero too. Right hangman cut. God, let me not live, and I could not find it in my heart to swinge the whole nest of them, one after another, and begin with him first. I'm grieved it should be said he is my brother, and take these courses. Well, he shall hear on't, and that tightly too, and I live, i' faith.
But, brother, let your apprehension, then, run in an easy current, not transported with heady rashness or devouring choler, and rather carry a persuading spirit, whose powers will pierce more gently and allure the imperfect thoughts you labour to reclaim to a more sudden and resolved assent.
Aye, let me alone for that, I warrant you.
And a bell rings.
How now? Oh, the bell rings to breakfast. Brother Giuliano, I pray you go in and bear my wife company. I'll but give order to my servants for the dispatch of some business, and come to you presently.
Exit Giuliano, enter Cobb.
What, Cobb? Our maids will have you by the back, i' faith, for coming so late this morning.
Perhaps so, sir. Take heed somebody have not them by the belly for walking so late in the evening.
And exit Cobb.
Now, in good faith, my mind is somewhat eased, though not reposed in that security as I could wish. Well, I must be content. However I set a face on it to the world, would I had lost a finger at a vent. So Prospero had ne'er lodged in my house. Why, it cannot be, where there is such resort of wanton gallants and young revellers, that any woman should be honest long. Is it like that factious beauty will preserve the sovereign state of chastity unscarred, when such strong motives muster and make head against her single peace? No, no. Beware when mutual pleasure sways the appetite, and spirits of one kind and quality do meet to parley in the pride of blood. Well, to be plain, if I but thought the time had answered their affections, all the world should not persuade me, but I were a cuckold. Marry, I hope they have not got that start, for opportunity have balked them yet, and shall do still while I have eyes and ears to attend the imposition of my heart. My presence shall be as an iron bar, twixt the conspiring motions of desire. Yea, every look or glance mine eye objects, shall check occasion, as one doth his slave, when he forgets the limits of prescription.
And enter Bianca with Hesperida.
Sister Hesperida, I pray you fetch down the rosewater above in the closet. Sweetheart, will you come in to breakfast?
And she have overheard me now?
Exit Hesperida.
I pray thee, good muss, we stay for you.
By Christ, I would not for 1,000 crowns.
What ail you, sweetheart? Are you not well? Speak, good muss.
Troth, my head aches extremely on a sudden.
Oh, Jesu.
How now? What?
Good Lord, how it burns. Must keep you warm, good truth. It is this new disease. There's a number are troubled withal, for God's sake. Sweetheart, come in out of the air.
How simple and how subtle are her answers. A new disease and many troubled with it? Why, true, she heard me all the world to nothing.
I pray thee, good sweetheart, come in. The air will do you harm, in truth.
I'll come to you presently. It will away, I hope.
Pray God it do.
Exit Bianca.
A new disease? I know not, new or old, but it may well be called poor mortal's plague, for like a pestilence it doth infect the houses of the brain. First it begins solely to work upon the fantasy, filling her seat with such pestiferous air as soon corrupts the judgment, and from thence sends like light contagion to the memory, still each of other catching the infection, which as a searching vapour spreads itself confusedly through every sensive part, till not a thought or motion in the mind be free from the black poison of suspect. Ah, but what error is it to know this, and what the free election of the soul in such extremes? Well, I will once more strive, even in despite of hell, myself to be, and shake this fever off that thus shakes me.
And exit Thorello. End of Act 1. And yeah, Act 1 seems to have... we'll see actually how effectively this is true tomorrow. But sort of set the stage. We've got, I think, most of our principals now in position. We've got an idea of their universe. There's a lot of world building has gone on in Act 1. And there's a lot of interesting things happening in that scene. I mean, the continuation of the scene when we picked up again, we have this sort of brief interruption, actually. It's more an interruption in the scene as Bobadilla and Matheo just come in and say, would Prospero like to come out and play? He's not in. And which sort of just to break up the action. And it's just that these nice little breaks. And then we have... more inner thoughts from Thorello, which is spinning in a slightly different way from what we were hearing earlier. It's not entirely different, but it does feel like there's maybe he was protesting a point beyond the limits of where he should be going earlier. So there's interesting things going on with this character, who we have only met in this scene, already being introduced as and having a much more of a relationship with the audience as well with these two speeches. And also we get to meet Bianca and, okay, no dialogue, Hesperida. So it hasn't all been men. Hasn't been far off. I did like Bianca. I thought there was something interesting going on with their relationship. There was the concern about plague as well. You know, he's feverish with his anxieties and his worries. So there's something interesting going on there. Alan?
Yeah, there was a word that turned up 2 or 3 times in Bianca's speech, which I haven't encountered before, which is muss. And I'm just wondering whether that's effectively mass or whether it is something else.
I think it's just a term of endearment, but I'll see who leaps in on that. I'll go to Helen then, Lois.
No, I presumed it was for mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that it's...
Me too.
Endearment.
My dear little mouse, yeah.
Yeah, we've got little endearments that we've had in other places. We may have had muss before. It sounds familiar to me. But you know, it's like pigsney and other little terms of endearment that you get cropping up, and it does seem like genuine affection that's going on there. It's quite sweet. Anyone want to leap in on other thoughts? Lois, then Lynn.
Yeah, well, in the earlier scene between Bobadilla and Matheo, we did hear that Matheo was really mad at Giuliano for something that he'd said the other night, and he's both he and Bobadilla are still pushing this. I mean, they refuse to speak to him. Actually, they address themselves entirely to Thorello, and when Giuliano answers them, they ignore him, and then they just throw one little insult at him about scavengers and go out. So there's a kind of thread of animosity which keeps running through the play. I mean, it's started in the previous scene, now we've got it here. It's just one little thing, really.
Yeah, but it's those little details that actually makes it all sort of hang together when performed. Lynn.
So yeah, and another vote for muss equals mouse, which is a common endearment. So yeah, I agree. But what I'm trying to keep the kind of groups straight in my head. It's a little bit of a struggle, but I think I count like 5 frat boys. That's something that probably doesn't mean anything to you guys on your side of the herring pond, but it's a type here. But the lads, and so there's Lorenzo Jr., his buddy Prospero, Bobabilla, cousin Stephano, and Matheo. So they're all sort of the younger generation, and then Lorenzo Sr., Giuliano, and Thorello are the kind of the older, the more stable kinds. But what I just noticed, and I think is interesting, of these 5 guys that all hang out together, some of whom are smart, some not so much. We keep hearing about Prospero, but here we are at the end of Act 1, and we haven't met him yet, have we?
Yeah, Prospero is still in waiting. It's not that far away, but we're not introducing us to too many characters, just setting us up for it.
But it's interesting that we keep talking about Prospero and we haven't seen him yet.
Yeah. I was interesting, actually. I was making a note of just, my thing is just how old are these characters, because I get the impression that Bobadilla is slightly older, maybe not by a lot, but what is the generational sweep, and especially when we're talking about are people brothers? Well, who's the older brother, who's the younger brother, and those sort of decisions that are being made. Changing how those relationships function as well slightly. Even if it's just a year or two, it could make quite a big difference to how they actually function as characters. Helen, then Alan.
Yes, I was going to make the point about age, because I think Bobadilla, even if he hasn't had an extensive military career, I think has had far more experience than the other young men who are all still living at home.
Yeah, if we're going sticking with the student sort of analogies, there's like the mature student who just for some reason never left. He keeps coming back, and is still sort of lingering there. Not quite sure if he's actually on any courses, but he always seems to be about. Alan.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm thinking of Bobadilla as being maybe early 20s. The other lads that we've heard about, probably late teens, and the 2 elder brothers, Thorello and his other brother, probably mid to late 20s. Would seem to work. Giuliano was the name that momentarily escaped me.
But then we have these other sort of peripheral characters as well, and the servants, and they're not we've got status play as well as age range as well throughout this, and really being clear about where the pecking order is with all of these characters. Again, a relatively busy scene in the sense that people are always coming in and doing something. Matheo and Bobadilla effectively enter, going, right, we're doing the thing, and they're effectively in the middle of a conversation. Bianca and Hesperida, it's breakfast. There's are you coming through? There's always action as people are entering, and there's always a sense that something is going on, that there is a world occurring, rather than people processing on and doing a scene will start now. Lois.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I find really amazing about Jonson, that he clearly visualized a lot of action in just about every scene, and you have to kind of infer it from what they're saying, because there's not usually very much instruction about it. But even just the movement of characters and who's speaking to whom, you suddenly realize that somebody has crossed the stage and is now with somebody else, and so on. It's really it's extremely well put together. I mean, every time I read these plays, I'm so impressed by them. I mean, the density as well of the language, and the combined with the density of the action.
Eric, were you waving? You were a little.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I realized that a lot of the insults that the characters speak are actually basically sort of they're projecting, they could be easily descriptions of themselves. So Bobadilla calls Giuliano or Thorello, one of the 2, scavenger, but it's actually he's acting more like a scavenger than the other ones. And it's just, I don't know, interesting to note.
A bit of projection going on. I like that. Lois again.
Yeah, and that's really true when Thorello advises Giuliano to be calm and mild and so on, because, I mean, he's only just starting to go ballistic at the end of this scene. But, I mean, a jealous man, you know, he's in a much worse state. Giuliano gets angry at everything. I think that's his humor. And Thorello's is clearly going to be jealousy.
Yeah, he's bubbling away under the surface. And when we actually get this speech, you know, come as a soliloquy, and we get inside his head, it's clearly there's a lot bubbling away under the surface of this guy. I like that idea that he's a bubbling furnace kind of thing, bubbling away. Other thoughts about this closing sequence before we go and just sort of open it out to the play overall so far? Elizabeth.
This is sort of segueing into the play itself. I absolutely love the use of language in this text. I think it's really, the only word I can use to describe, as Lois said, was dense. It was just layers upon layers of almost like a syntactical game that Jonson is playing with the audience. And I was just wondering how much they would have picked up on this in performance, because I know an early modern viewer audience would have been, I think this is tailored to an early modern audience. But at the same time, I do think it's so rich that they may have missed a lot. I just wondered what the group's thoughts were on that.
Well, it's also a question of what the performance text in terms of its length would have been as well, how much of this would have been there, because of course it's a very, very long, you know, the early modern plays, have a time slot, and you've really, I mean, they might have ridden it a bit, but it's they'll chance their arm perfectly happily to do that, I'm sure. But it's still very long. So how much of this text would have been in all performance contexts is a really good question. And how much would people have got? It's, sometimes you throw stuff out there and it's just to keep the actor from getting bored rather than for the audience to get. Briony, then Alan.
Surely that is a credit to him in terms of, I mean, I know there's certain films that I watch that I've seen 15 times already and I still see something new when I watch it. And they're the ones that you keep going back to. So in terms of getting repeat custom to see your plays, if there's this sense that it's dense and there's loads going on and you might be missing some of it, then yeah, surely that's going to make an audience more likely to recommend and come back.
And that's a good point, yes, because these plays are in repertoire. They and this one is reasonably successful. From the evidence we have, that maybe that's actually part of the draw. Is that a fun spectacle that's actually relatively thin may not demand repeat viewings in the way you would like. Alan, then Lynn, then Eric.
I'm just wondering what the performance history is like for this. Whether it was an indoor theatre or one of the outdoor theatres. Indoor, then outdoor rather. I think it's possibly the Curtain. I've got a note here? Question mark. Though a wider repertoire of places is available. I'm sure someone will pick me up on that in a moment. I'll go to Lynn, then Eric, then Lois.
Yeah, I was thinking about the idea of. So much in the language, you have to keep coming back to it to keep discovering things. And I think hoping that this would get revived and be viewed again in performance with pleasure is part of it. But Jonson was also unusual in that he supervised the printing of his own plays and masques and poetry, and would later actually print some of his works in folio, which was considered extremely pretentious at the time. So I think that he's also thinking of his plays as a reading text, so that you can go back and look at it later when he decides he's going to do a printable version and annotate it himself and tell you how to read it. So I think all of that is in there for the viewing audience, but also for the reading audience later. And then I had a kind of final thoughty thing that, in thinking about what Lois was saying about how these plays are constructed, I've also heard the professor of early modern literature compare Jonson's plays to little machines, the way everything all kind of works together, which I think is a kind of a helpful metaphor. And it kind of explains why they're so hard to edit, because if you take one of the gears out of the machine stops working. So they can be really challenging to cut down because everything is so interrelated.
And the question about Jonson keeping an eye to the future and reworking his own work. I mean, I've already said that there are different textual versions of this to come, and that eye for longevity may come into more into focus further down the line. Eric, Lois, then Briony, then Rachael.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it kind of like, having seen some Ben Jonson plays, like without really knowing that the language was like this, it feels a bit like being hit by a train. By the time you figure out what's happening in the previous scene, it you're still trying to catch up with what's happening at the same time, sort of. But then I guess it depends on the performers more than the actual sort of. I mean, sometimes the speed is in your favor, sometimes it's not.
Lois.
Yeah, I think Jonson was apparently notorious for really drilling the actors, behaving like a modern director. There's a reference in the induction to one of his plays to his rushing around in the tiring house and pestering the actors and so on. And there's a prologue in the Restoration when they revived The Alchemist, saying that they wondered if they could even do it without Jonson there, because he apparently drilled people in every word, every line, every speech, and they felt that they kind of lost the art. So clearly, everybody thought this was, was something that required a special technique more than a lot of other people. I mean, I don't think anybody else has talked of in this way.
Yeah, and it does feel that the text holds that holds water with this text as we're reading it. It's full of detail. That's hidden away there, and probably a lot of detail that isn't even here, that only at the time they knew. Briony.
Yeah, I was just going to observe based on what Lynn said, and then what Lois has said has kind of added into it as well. It gives this picture of somebody who, because his work is so intricate and many layered, he kind of needs that level of control with the printing and the directing to make sure that all of these meanings are there, or to feel like they are anyway.
Rachael.
No, I was going to talk about that many meanings that Briony brought up and that Elizabeth brought up, that these words have multiple meanings, and that which would the audience pick them all up. And I think that's part of the production or the actor's choice with which way you're going with that. You know what I mean? But also there was something else I thought about that I wondered if the choice that you would make as to how to interpret those words would be based on the humor that the character is supposed to represent. I'm not familiar with humors or humorism, but I wonder if that could paint the color of the choice that's being made to fit into that particular human humor.
Yes, and I have been relatively circumspect in not talking and going too much into theory about humours at this stage. We will feather that in over the coming plays, just to keep everyone hopefully focused on the text as it approaches us in that our usual fashion. Elizabeth.
Yeah, Rob, I just wanted to bring us back because we were talking so much about the text and about Jonson's almost intentions for the narrative for his audience. And I just love the bit between Matheo and Bobabilla where they talk about Go by Hieronymo. And he says, is it not well penned? And they said, oh, well penned. I would fain see all the poets of our time pen such another play as that was. And I think there's some meta-criticism going on there of this actual text in the play.
Oh yeah, there are all sorts of games, and it's reminding me also of a few years down, just coming into focus now. We've done almost all of Marston, and the similar level of density, though different construction of play method. That we've got all these contemporaries that are sort of bouncing about at the moment, who are doing slightly different things to the kind of plays we were looking at in the early 1590s, the late 1580s, and there's a new generation coming in who are doing different things, and they're all in conversation and sometimes literally having stand-up rows with each other. More on this to come. So much fun to be had. Final thoughts around the room. If you've got anything additional you want to add, feel free to not add them if you've got nothing additional. But we have stated, this is a long play. There's a lot of material, and that question of how do we get it on stage? If we're thinking on stage, you can think in other mediums as well, because it's that thing of going, I don't want to remove any of it. There's so much good stuff here. But to save the production, you probably need to take some of this out. And I'm thinking salami editing. Just the odd line here, the odd bit here, tweaking some of the more obscure references. But what are people's thoughts? It feels like you just need to spend months getting into Jonson's head. You really need a company that knows and is really into this in a way that some of the in the same way as I think you need for Marston as well, but not necessarily for some of the other playwrights. But I don't know what your thoughts or feelings are. Don't let me railroad you into a thought that you do not have. Elizabeth, do you have any final thoughts to throw in?
No, I just wanted to echo what you just said, that you have to kind of be like a Jonson groupie to really kind of get to grips with the text. You have to wrestle with it almost to kind of get a sense of what maybe Jonson's intentions were for his audience. Yeah.
Helen, any final thoughts?
Yes, I'm rather taken with the varying views on what the aspiring gentleman ought to aspire to, such as being belligerent and fighting well and having a hawk and quoting Kyd at great length and really, really admiring him. And all the various types of clothing that he should wear, like silk stockings. And I think it may be that there's even more to come. I think there's quite a picture to be made of what people were trying and failing to achieve in the way of gentility.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean that stuff, the kind of stuff that students are into. And even though it's different, it's sort of really the same. Briony, any final thoughts?
I don't want to say too much because we've discussed it. I'm enjoying it, but it's like I'm seeing early modern young ones.
Rachael, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think this text is really dense. I do want to, even just coming this far, I want to revisit this because it is like Marston, that he's got so much going on that like a scene, or at least a scene analysis from this play or something from one of these scenes, because there's so much that you could go into because he's so granular with things. And I think maybe that's why he would drill his actors, because there is that there's that short thing by Beckett where it's some like abstract play, but if you like do it wrong you could get sued for it, because he wanted it just like that, because that's how much he was paying attention to what he wrote.
Oh yeah, when you get the license to do any Samuel Beckett plays, there is an additional bit of paper just saying you absolutely, just to make it really clear, you cannot change a damn thing, or we will sue from beyond the grave. Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually Jonson really suits first looks this process really well as well. Actually, you know, it's that process of getting to the second and on stage. It's where we hit that time problem. It starts getting in the way. Lois, any final thoughts?
I mean, I think what people often enjoy in Jonson is this enormous amount of period detail. You really feel you're right there, you know, in the 1590s, with all sorts of stuff that you don't get in most other plays, and very specific about clothing, about, you know, water carrying. I mean, just all sorts of jobs that people are doing. Yeah, I think cutting it, I mean, it's so difficult. I've seen this play twice. I mean, once was it was meant, I think, originally to be the opening production at the Swan, though it wasn't actually, so it would have been 1986. And it was a brilliant production. I mean, the director, John Caird, really understood Jonson, I think. I've also seen it done as a Red Not Dead, where they had they were doing the English version, actually, but they had the really inspired, oh dear, I don't think I can tell you about this, actually.
I think maybe we'll hold off on that anecdote until after we've stopped recording.
Yes, right. Okay, yes. Self-censorship weighs in here. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it has a modern performance history. So you know, it's not insuperable, but there are barriers that we will continue to address here. Emma, any final thoughts?
I really agree with Lois, actually. I just love the busyness of it and the fact that it is just this big mesh of people and situations, and it isn't a grandiose plot, but it's so engaging anyway, because it's this realistic view of life in a big city, and there's so much, as I said earlier in the recording, there's so much relatable behavior in it, and yeah, I look forward to. Sadly, I'm not in the next couple, but I will read it myself and see what happens next.
Yes, Alan, any final thoughts?
Difficult to come to any firm conclusions at this stage. I think I would take the point that Lynn was making earlier on, that it is so heavily crafted that actually making significant cuts would be darn difficult without losing a hell of a lot of the mechanics of it. The one thing I would like added in some ways is that for once we've got a dramatis personae which, beyond actually naming the players, is wholly uninformative. And I'm sure there must be somewhere extant a dramatic personae which gives the usual 2 or 3 word character description for people, which would probably make it a little easier to get one's head into it.
And Eric, final thoughts?
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the language, though I thought I wasn't going to, because, you know, like as I said, I've seen like 2 versions of Jonson plays, and I was like, what on earth? Why? Yeah, it was painful. But then I don't know, just sort of doing it like this seems to clarify what's going on as well. And also there's a part of me going, because we've been talking about students a lot. Yeah, this is like sort of the Parnassus plays, but after, like the aftermath, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, it's a sort of yeah. I mean, they're not that far temporally in time. Parnassus plays are coming a few years after this, and yeah, the way they overlap with that kind of student experience, there is something there. I like that. I like seasons, so I always like things that overlap thematically. Yeah, the reason I keep flagging up this question of text and making things work is, you know, it has been a known challenge that Jonson is difficult to realise, and that's why we do this, to try and make the best decisions we can. Lynn, any final thoughts?
Just kind of repeating what people have been saying about, what do you do this? How do you get this big monster on stage? I think since we live in an era that has resources that weren't available in the year 1600, I think about that could this be done in episodes in some kind of broadcast or electronic medium so that you could preserve the text? Because as we're observing, it's really hard to cut because of the way everything works together. But as a late friend of mine from the theater used to say, a 3-hour comedy is a contradiction in terms, which I think is more true for Americans. I think that culturally we're less patient than Europeans are. I don't know, that might be making an unfair generalization, but yeah, I think there's some truth to a 3-hour comedy as an oxymoron. So something to think about.
Yeah,
doing it in episodes, not making anyone sit through the whole thing.
Yeah, and ultimately that will be part of the game plan. Is it's what works best, because it's the physical business, because we're a podcast, so an audio adaptation actually might struggle to get across some of the things that's going on here. But so we're sort of looking at something that has to be filmed, and that creates all sorts of interesting questions. But we don't have to come up. We've only done Act 1. I've been forcing people to come up with opinions perhaps too early. It's very early in the game, and very early in Jonson's career. So we have 3 more sessions to dig deep into the rest of every man in his humour. All that remains is to thank all these wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. Bye. You may see I am somewhat audacious.